Yeah, hi, good morning. And
this meeting is being recorded.
Oh, just getting a message that the recording has started. Yeah, thank you very much for joining our webinar. We hope that you find it useful and get some valuable tips and tricks about the use of escape rooms in health professions education that you could potentially use in your own educational settings. This is the first part of a two-part webinar series. And today we're going to mainly focus on the concept of educational escape rooms. So we'll give an introduction to ourselves and then go a little bit further into what educational escape rooms are, why people, educators have begun to use them within health professions education, and also we'll talk about the evidence of their efficacy and how much they manage to achieve the outcomes they set out to achieve. We have set some time to questions at the end. So if you keep a note of your questions as we're going through the webinar, you can type them into the chat if you wish to, but we'll go through them at the end and we'll have some time for discussion there. And we won't be answering them as we're going, just to keep the flow and make sure that we're keeping the time so we can keep within the 1 hour webinar time slot. The webinar is interactive. We were trying to think about what's the best way to explain what educational escape rooms are, and we thought that that would be to include some puzzles taken from our own escape rooms that we'll use to go through and show some concrete examples of what potential puzzles can be. They are obviously adapted to a presentation setting, so it's not the full puzzle, but it will hopefully give you an idea and some inspiration of potential puzzles that you could use in your own escape rooms. For this, we'll be using the Menti platform, and we have puzzles as we go along, so it would be a good idea if we just give you a minute or two to log on to the Menti platform now, and then you'll be ready to fill in the puzzles as we go along. If everyone just wants to go, you can either access through the QR code or using the website above, and then you just have to input the code. So I'll just give a minute or two so you can log on there.
We already have the first likes on Menti, so thank you for participating.
Yep. Can you see how many managed to log in, Panagiotis?
Judging from likes, we have at least 10 attendees who have logged in, out of a total of 34 at the moment, and growing fast, as I see.
Okay.
We have more than half of our attendees in Menti, so I think we could continue.
Yeah, we can continue, and then if there's anybody that hasn't got access at this point, we can also bring up this slide again when we come to the puzzles. We have done it in a escape room style, that each part of the presentation has a puzzle to start with, and you have to solve that puzzle to kind of unlock that we will present the next content. So we'll see how you get on with those. We do also have some just general poll questions as we're going along as well, just to get an idea of your experiences with escape rooms and your perceptions of escape rooms at the moment. If you do have any problems with the platform, if you either just speak up or write them in the chat, then we can see if we can get it working for you. So if we're coming to our first puzzle, before we introduce who we are, I'll bring it up onto the screen. It will just be like an escape room, so I don't really explain anything or give any context. It will just be there for you to try and solve and find the code that it asks for. Panagiotis will be keeping an eye on the results and the answers that we get into the Menti platform, and then we'll bring that up at the end, or at the end of this puzzle, to show you what the correct answer was.
Yes, and I have opened already the response page in Menti. Have a look. You will have approximately 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes for this puzzle. So take your time and have a look. When you are certain that you have the answer,
How is it looking in the Menti platform?
it looks rather well. I'm
Yeah.
just waiting for a couple of seconds in case anyone else wants to participate. Otherwise, about 5 seconds, we will close the poll and show you the answer. Okay, I will share my screen now. And as many of you correctly deduced, the code is 324, and you wrote it also in many different ways, because it was exactly taking the correct syntax of 2 sentences and finding the corresponding numbers. You did well. You passed through the first puzzle of our escape room webinar about escape rooms. Lucy, I think you can take it from here and continue.
Yep. So that was a good start. Well done, everybody. For anybody that wants an explanation, it's not quite clear. So the idea was to make this into a phrase. So attention, please, there is a risk of communicable disease. And then you take the second, fourth, and first number in that sequence to find the code. So well done. So we'll move on to the next part, which is an introduction of who these two people are that are suddenly quizzing you at 10 o'clock in the morning. So my name is Lucy. I'm a medical doctor from the UK. I graduated in 2017 from the Hull York Medical School, and I completed my foundation training in Yorkshire and Humberside area in the UK. And alongside my foundation training, I completed a master's in health professions education. I then used this in a year as a clinical teaching fellow at Hull University Teaching Hospitals, where I spent a year focusing on medical education and also research within medical education. And after this time, I moved to Denmark, and I'm now working as a public health trainee at an institution called CAMES. And there's also, it's a large medical education institution or organization, so I still have a big focus on medical education and research, and that's how I come to work with escape rooms. I have various interests within this area, so simulation-based training, including serious games, and with a specific focus on the training of non-technical skills, so leadership, situational awareness, decision-making. And then alongside all that I do, I have a focus on sustainable healthcare education. So both how our teaching practices can be sustainable, but also how we can educate health professionals to deliver sustainable clinical practice. As mentioned, I'm currently working at CAMES, which stands for Copenhagen Academy for Medical Education and Simulation. And this is part of the Simulation and Learning Technology Department within Copenhagen. It's a world-leading academy for medical education and simulation. And I believe it's actually one of the largest simulation centres in Europe. We work with a range of different tasks, so we deliver and develop courses to health professions, and we also research and evaluate the effects of different teaching methods. And then we also have a close contact to clinicians out in clinical practice and look at how we can change and innovate our clinical practices to deliver the safest patient care. We have different experiences with escape rooms. We developed one a couple of years ago, and our first escape room, and we're now working in this project Escape for Health, which Panagiotis will tell you more about soon. If you're interested in hearing more about CAMES and the work that we're doing, I've included our website and our Facebook page at the bottom of the slide.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm Panagiotis Antoniou. I'm a laboratory reader in the Lab of Medical Physics and Digital Innovation at the Medical School of Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. I come from a clinical background of a clinical medical physics background, finished a Bachelor in Physics, continued by a medical physics master's and PhD in neuroscience. That's what triggered my interest, computational neuroscience and the impact of education in the brain started triggering this interest with serious games and educational modalities that use them. I've worked since 2013 in the Lab of Medical Physics and Digital Innovation, focusing on immersive educational modalities. We have started from web-based virtual patients, developed desktop-based applications for training in dentistry and medicine, and we venture in virtual reality and augmented reality for these purposes. Now it's a really exciting opportunity to start a physical, immersive space in the form of escape room. Our lab, next slide, please. Our lab is the Lab of Medical Physics and Digital Innovation, a very cross-disciplinary lab in the Medical School of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. It is a research hub for several topics, the most applicable of which are medical education informatics, neuroscience of cognition and affection, and innovation and technology empowered learning. We also touch on issues like assistive technologies and silver science and BCI, along with more exotic themes. But regarding education and regarding our topic today, our focus is mainly on the ways that escape rooms can facilitate medical training, healthcare training, and possible ways to evaluate this. Now, let's talk about our subject. Escape rooms. The short definition is that they are settings where teams of participants solve puzzles and riddles in a closed space with a particular theme to achieve predetermined goals in a limited amount of time. The rigorous explanation will come from my co-presenter in a little while, but that's just to put an outline. So the focus is on interactional dynamics outside of the main work context. And the need is to provide insights on how teams work and exercises that help learn complex concepts and not just those pertaining to the actual medical skills needed. Things like teamwork feature prominently. Now, about Escape for Health specific. If you may, Lucy, thank you. Escape for Health aims at creating scenarios for multi-professional, experiential training and education in healthcare. And in short, what we're trying to do, we're trying to set up escape rooms, both on-site and virtually, in several places on the topic of medical education, create scenarios that are conducive to be implemented as escape rooms. And in that vein, by using especially the AR, VR platforms, facilitate remote and distance training. In short, as the media blurb would say, Escape for Health explores the potential role of escape rooms in healthcare curricula and provides curricula enrichments and innovations to multi-professional education. We have developed at this point 4 diverse escape rooms, one purely physical, others that are hybrid, and another one that I think it's deployable both virtually and physically, as well as a pure AR escape room. We're in the process of identifying ways to evaluate educational efficacy acceptance, and other perceptions. And we aim to, through this project, to find a roadmap towards curricular integration of such modalities in healthcare. I think that as a context, this makes do, and I think, Lucy, you can continue.
Yeah, thank you. So that is a short introduction into who we are and our experience with escape rooms. So now we're going to come into the content of the webinar. So starting with what we mean by an educational escape room. As promised, this is a new section, so there's a new puzzle to solve. And again, it's just the same process of filling it in Menti.
Again, no clues whatsoever, just use your eyes.
How is it looking on the platform?
I can show you if you think that it's enough time. We have 10 participants so far.
I think your connection was cutting out a little bit.
Can you see the actual Menti screen now?
Yep.
So
yeah,
I think we're good.
Yep, the correct answer was 63108. So we can see that the majority of you have gotten this correct. So well done, another success. I think we're going straight to the poll. So if we stay in the Menti platform, Panagiotis, I think you've got the next question.
Yes. Give me a moment too. Since you went to the next room for Little Escape, please help us with this. What do you think? The audience is divided, it appears.
Yeah, it's about equally divided. But the number of no's are growing. So I can see that there's some uncertainty. So hopefully we'll be able to explain and describe what an educational escape room is. So by the end of the webinar, the majority of you are answering yes.
Exactly. Maybe proceed to the next question, Lucy?
Yep.
Now this is a tricky one.
Okay. So it's about divided half and half of who kind of understands what an educational escape room is, but in terms of running it, there's a little bit more uncertainty, and hopefully we'll be able to address both of these aspects in the following slides. So if I continue now to explain and how to run an educational escape room. Before I do, I will just explain this so that you all can see how we got to the answer. So in each of these sections, there was a card missing, and that gave you the code. So you can see there's a 3 missing here. You can see there's 10 missing here. Sorry, there's a 6 missing here, a 10 missing here, a 3 missing here, and an 8 missing here. And then the sequence here shows you what sequence you need to input the numbers into. So what is an educational escape, or what is an escape room? So escape rooms are live action team-based games where players discover clues, solve puzzles, and accomplish tasks in one or more rooms in order to accomplish a specific goal in a limited amount of time. So that definition covers a lot of different aspects. So if we break it down to see what it really means, it's important that it's team-based. So there's usually multiple people, teams of around 4 to 6 that complete an escape room. The idea is that they discover clues and solve puzzles and accomplish tasks. So it's not given to them when they go into the room what's expected of them. There's no clear instructions. They need to go around the room and discover these for themselves, and then find which pieces match to the other piece so they can solve a puzzle. So there's a lot of discovery included in escape rooms. And then they usually have a specific goal. So there's usually a narrative or a theme surrounding the escape room. It could be anything. I've recently played one where we were in a airport and we had to reach a flight on time. There's other ones where there's a pandemic and you have to find the cure. But there is a specific goal and there is an end point to the escape room. And then the last thing is that it's a pressurized, quite stressful environment because the team has a limited amount of time to complete these tasks. So it's not that they can go in and use all day, but they typically have around an hour to complete all of the puzzles and achieve their specific goal. So how does this sequence come about when they're actually playing an escape room? So usually the team would meet the game master. This is the person that doesn't go into the room with them, but has cameras so they can see and hear everything that's happening within the room. And they're making sure that things go as they should do, so they can deliver the clues if needed, or instruct the group if something's gone a little wrong. So they're the game master, and they would begin by explaining the rules. So every escape room usually has a set of rules of what participants can and can't do. For example, if you need to use excessive force to open something, then it probably means you shouldn't need to open it. So they explain the specific rules for their escape room, and then they will also begin to set the narrative, so explain the story behind why they're in this situation and what they need to achieve. After the game master has explained all of these parts, the participants enter the room and the countdown begins. As said, it would typically be around an hour. The players begin to explore the room and interact with its different elements. It's quite chaotic at this point. They don't really know which parts go together. They're conscious that the time's running down. They get stressed because it's been 10 minutes and they've not solved a puzzle yet. But they're just looking at all of the different bits and seeing which parts go together. And then suddenly they will find 2 parts, or they'll suddenly crack the code and they solve the first puzzle. And once you solve a puzzle, it typically affects another part of the room. So they might open another part of a puzzle, they might even open a door to another room, but they generally receive more equipment or clues or codes, which then leads them through the escape room. So they would continue to work through the puzzles and solving the puzzles over time. But if they do become stuck, they can be presented with a clue. Different game masters use different techniques. Either they will present the clue when they have predefined criteria. So for example, if it's been 10 minutes and they haven't solved a puzzle, they might present a clue to the group. Other game masters choose to wait until the participants themselves ask for a clue. But there is usually a fail-safe to help the progression of the escape room, because otherwise it's not very fun to sit there for an hour and not really be able to progress. So there is always the possibility of getting clues to help the group proceed through the escape room and achieve their goal. Once the final puzzle is solved, then the group can escape the room and they've achieved their goal. So that would be how a typical escape room, if we were to go out onto the street and play in an escape room, that would be kind of the sequence that it would follow. Once you've achieved your goal, you then go home or celebrate with your team or whatever you wish to do, but that there is nothing more to it. Just showing you some examples. As I mentioned, Kames has been working with escape rooms for a couple of years now, and this article was our very first escape room that we have run. And this within this article, you can get a manual of how to set up and run this escape room to give you a very concrete example of how an escape room has been run at our institution for medical students. And I've got some pictures of that experience just to show you kind of how we did it. So in this situation, the students were actually in darkness for an hour just to add that extra level of difficulty. But you can see how we've got all of the puzzles set up around the room, and there's no kind of clear instructions when they go in. This is them just starting and yeah, being faced with all of their puzzles that they needed to solve. You can see at the back, we ran this in our simulation room. So we have a little booth where it's a one-way glass, so the game master could see and hear everything that was happening just as you would within a entertainment escape room. Some of the puzzles that we included, for example, involved that you had to go and find different parts of the room. Obviously it's darkness, so you couldn't see all of the equipment. You had to go and explore and find the room. We had different puzzles where we were using laparoscopic equipment, and you had to kind of fish a key out using the laparoscopic tools. The box was covered though, so there was only one person that could see in the box and had to direct the other person to catch the key. We also had where they had a puzzle and they had to put the pieces together, and then if they turned over the puzzle, they could it had a message on the back of it. And then yeah, this was different parts of the room where, for example, you think you've got a bookshelf and that doesn't really add anything to the room, but actually one of the books was a safe that they could open once they found the key. So there's different ways of setting up your puzzles, and different types of puzzles and challenges that the participants can face once they're in the escape room. This escape room was implemented or designed and implemented before Corona, and the idea was that there was a new pandemic virus and you had to find the cure. It has slightly different connotations doing it now, but yeah, at the time it seemed like a good idea and didn't seem like it was something that was imminently going to happen. So that's kind of the idea of the puzzles and just running an escape room, but obviously we're talking in the context of an educational escape room. So we wanted to kind of explain a little bit more of how you add education or a learning aspect to such a game. So this is the sequence that we typically use. We start with a 15-minute briefing. So the groups would come separately, so around 4 to 6 participants, they would all come at different times, and they would meet their game master as they usually would, and this is where they again hear the rules and the narrative, but we also make sure that we outline the aim of the escape room in terms of the learning context and also their learning objectives. We often find that there's lots of material that we can debrief on at the end of the escape room. There's lots of different elements that are brought up, such as leadership, communication, teamwork, decision-making, problem solving. So to kind of add some direction to the debriefing, we define in advance which part we're going to focus on. And this just gives the students an idea of what they should begin to reflect over. They're prepared for what they're going to discuss in the debriefing. So we outline this in advance. We then complete the escape room as an entertainment-based escape room would be completed. We have set, we've used both a 45-minute length escape room and also an hour-long escape room, but it happens in the same way as you would if you were just going to play one from the streets. Once the escape room is completed, we then run the debriefing, and we typically use around 45 minutes for this debriefing session. The process is similar to a simulation debriefing, that you would describe the situation, describe what's happened within the escape room, and then you would begin to reflect over the experience. What happened, what went well, what could you have improved, why did certain situations arise, and how could you have done things differently if you were going to play the escape room again. We, at the kind of summarizing the debrief, we have a big focus on transfer to practice. It's important to highlight that an escape room is very different, especially if it's not a clinically focused escape room, but it's just a bizarre setting such as we had with the pandemic setting, that it's so different from their clinical environment that it can be difficult to see or match that to their clinical practice. So we have a big focus on discussing how could you take your learning further? How could you implement this into practice? How could you use this learning, these new things that you've found, that you've learned in your clinical practice? So that would be how we would transform having an escape room into more of a learning experience. So that was a quick overview of what we mean by an escape room, and now we're going to go on to explain why people have started to use them in an educational setting and what they can be used for. So before we come on to that, we will have our next puzzle.
Once more, the Menti is open, so have a look at the puzzle, solve it, and input the answer. Just as a quick hint, I can only say that in Menti, we are asking you for a 2-word answer, so do your best. Please note that we are looking for a 2-word answer.
Have we had any responses?
Yes, this time this was a tricky one. I can definitely share the screen if you want. We have 9 answers at the moment, going strong. Let me show you what I am seeing. So here we had a rather interesting puzzle in the sense that the correct answer was, in fact, antimicrobial agent, but several of you put either one of the 2 words as a different answer. Responses are coming in. I think that we can explain the puzzle a little while, if you want, Lucy, and I'll take it from there.
Yeah.
So the answer here is the first 3 letters are ant, from the ant that you're seeing. Me, myself, and I is the next letter. Me, Greek, mu, is micro in notation math. Now we are cheating and we are putting an I for B, antimicro B, and instead of B-E-E, we're putting B-I, and then the first 2 words, the first 2 letters from alien, it's antimicrobial, and agent is just the image below from the secret agent figure. And that was the puzzle. I think that continuing on, let me start my poll. Now, what do you think in Mentimeter? What do you think are crucial factors in immersive healthcare education? These are straightforward answers. So tell us what you think. Teamwork, gamification, relevancy, authenticity, psychological safety. A lot of very useful terms. Any more? Many more coming up. Psychological safety features prominently. Non-technical skills, authenticity, teamwork, and psychological safety take the lead. Okay, let's keep that as a cue for our discussion in a little while. And continue to the next question. Collaboration, teamwork. This is excellent. Now, what does an escape room offers in healthcare education? You might take into consideration the previous question. Well, or not. Engagement, focus and attention, fun. Great. You see a lot of interesting responses with teamwork and engagement featuring prominently. Problem solving. Very well. So we have collaboration, interest, teamwork, engagement. And actually, I'm going to take cue from this one to continue with the presentation, because the dominant responses are what we have in mind ourselves for immersive healthcare education. And if we look at what is important, what is considered important there, it's engagement, it's ease of access, it's tactility, touch things, actually use your manual skills to acclimate yourself with the clinical environment, and also data accessibility, in the sense that you can actually see medical imaging data, medical cases, things that previously were only special cases to be explored in very specific medical centers. Okay, but are we really looking about these things? If we go to the next slide. What about hard educational goals like knowledge retention, usable skills, tacit knowledge? We say that we want tactility, but are we actually learning how to read the medical room? Do we build a scientific paradigm, a worldview that is facilitating us to work as healthcare professionals? So we're focusing on the will to learn. Are we focusing also on the actual learning itself? Now, next slide, please. We're going to look at the 2020 systematic review about escape rooms that touched both STEM and healthcare education and healthcare education rooms. And we're going to take cues from this review to explore some themes that both from our work and from common practice emerge. So from this escape rooms systematic review, we take the regarding learning objectives that ER escape rooms are used to foster, demonstrate, assess students' knowledge and skills, and less often used to introduce, extend, and integrate content, knowledge, and skills. Anyone who's familiar with learning objectives and understands that the verbs are important. There are very specific verbs that you have to use to define learning objectives. So seeing this, we get several cues. We get the cue that escape rooms in education better adhere to a flipped approach. They are better at anchoring knowledge, not at providing new knowledge. You have to come somewhat prepared from a lecture or from a webinar or some another resource, and the escape room anchors the knowledge. They can also be assessment vehicles. However, the core precept is that you apply already acquired knowledge in an interactive environment. Introducing new knowledge is not the strong point because you have the distractions of gamification, which are engaging, but they detract from actually acquiring knowledge. So escape rooms anchor already acquired knowledge through activities. That's takeaway message number one. Next slide, please. Now, the thing that emerged also from your polls, almost none of your responses was about medical knowledge. It was teamwork, engagement, collaboration, problem solving. The review is more gentle in the sense that it mentions combination of content knowledge and clinical skill. And that is the essential difference between escape rooms and medical simulators. Simulators are important for extreme fidelity. You can actually do whole operations in a good simulator, VR or AR technology supported simulator. However, they are not a 360-degree actual practice. You don't have a full clinical setting when things can go wrong. You can simulate things going wrong, but things happening outside your control, for example, lights flipping, problems with your colleagues. These either have to be heavily scripted or they have to be actually coded in the simulation. In that vein, escape rooms can simulate more holistically a clinical setting and thus provide a more authentic clinical simulation. So takeaway message number two, escape rooms can approach more authentically the ill-posed problems encountered in realistic settings. Next slide, please. Now, again, in comparison to STEM, that's science, technology, education, science education mostly in secondary schools, medical escape rooms describe more general skills and affective goals. That's a key. Examples of formulated affective goals are increased situational awareness or the bias of framing patients. Now, affective goals. This is where immersive learning with escape rooms is important because it's fundamental for building professional resilience before the clinical years, for example, of a medical student. Escape rooms focus not on the simulation itself, they focus on the simulated chaos. What was mentioned by my colleague before was that we don't give any instruction. So you're going into an alien environment and you have to find your bearings. That's very important in healthcare. Acclimate the learner with the reality of no hand holding. You don't get, after you go through your training, even though in certain procedures there's a very formulaic approach, you don't get any hand holding. So a situation that prepares you for that is very conducive to medical training. Thus, escape rooms can be construed as preclinical simulations, in quotation mark, they're not simulations, of clinical challenges. Next one, please. Now, where does the game ties into all this and how this tie into the curriculum? It's interesting to note that in a 2020 review, only 6 out of 36 escape rooms were standalone activities. The rest of these were embedded in a course curriculum. Now, we must note that this includes also secondary school escape rooms for STEM. However, several of the medically created escape rooms also were used for assessment and also for training. That is optimistic regarding the format for curricular integration, because it shows that its uptake is better than many other immersive modalities. There are not many VR, AR resources that, for example, are a mainstay in medical education. This is shifting, but escape rooms are really interesting in that regard. Now, puzzles aligned with the curriculum in an escape room facilitate integration. There is a truism that if you have to take a test after you complete a well-designed serious game, you're doing something wrong. If you manage to finish a serious game correctly and fully, you have actually mastered the material that it covers. Thus, escape rooms appear to resonate better to educators. They are complex activities capture more authentically the skill sets of healthcare professionals. And the simulated chaos sometimes likens a lot a clinical skills workshop. Thus, we put a question mark here, but we can discuss it or explore it. Are escape rooms a serious game that can pass clinicians' scrutiny? These are my brief foray into how and why escape rooms in healthcare education. I think we can continue from that on, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now I'm going to speak a little bit more about the evidence and their effectiveness as an educational tool. You'll be pleased to know that this is the final puzzle. So yeah, we'll complete this. I will add a little bit more pressure. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So if we just have a minute and a half, it's probably the most difficult puzzle. So now you're really set in that escape room experience, but we'll see how we get on.
You'll be happy to know that we have our first response.
Fantastic. That was quick.
In about 10 seconds, I think it would be a good idea to share our results. We have already 9 participants.
Okay. Now we can find out whether these are the correct responses. Perfect. Yeah, we can see the majority of people have answered 578, which was the correct answer. I'll go on to the. Yeah, I'll go on to the slideshow. I won't go step by step through the puzzle, but basically the numbers here correlate to the message, which explains whether the numbers are the correct numbers to use and whether they're correctly placed. So if you combine the 4 combinations in the 4 messages and perhaps have a little bit more time, then you can figure out which of the 3 numbers make the sequence. And in this case, it was 578. I'll jump over the poll just so we can continue and talk more about the evidence. So this was just to show the extent of the literature, that when I'm talking about the evidence, it's not that I'm basing these conclusions on a large number of publications. Doing a quick PubMed search query of educational escape rooms shows that the highest number of publications in the year is 49, and we can see the trend over the last 10 years. So it's definitely increasing in popularity. More people are exploring this instrument, but it's not that we don't have a large literature base at this point. This is not a comprehensive list of all of the different ways escape rooms have been used, but it just shows an overview of who or which professions they're typically used in and which topics are typically addressed. So we can see that so far it's primarily been used in nursing, pharmacy and medical students. And particularly within medical education, it's covered lots of different topics ranging from surgery and medicine to emergency medicine and radiology. And it's also come into the more physiological teaching, such as cardiovascular physiology. There have been other foci of the articles. Some people have begun to explore how we debrief, whether we should be applying simulation type debriefing styles or whether this instrument requires a different type of debriefing. And there's also been articles that's been looking more at just gamification of learning and the effects of this. So it's used in different areas, but it's not systematically used. So far it's been more ad hoc of where people have had the opportunity to employ an escape room. I'm focusing on two large systematic reviews, one of them which Panagiotis mentioned, but first I'll talk about this one which focuses on gamified learning in higher education. So again, it's not specific to medical education or university level education, but it's just looking at gamified learning. They highlighted in this review that the reason that escape rooms or gamified learning has become more popular is because educators have noticed a decrease in engagement and low levels of motivation among students. So people have begun, or educators have begun to explore how can we address this issue. And they've considered that the natural dynamics that happen within a game, that you have a competition either with yourself or with other people, you have motivation to complete the game, it's fun, it's engaging, could be a way that we address these challenges. So there's been an increase in the use of gamified learning in higher education. I also wanted to highlight the terminology because there's two different terms that are employed depending on the level of which gaming is employed into the teaching. So you could have gamification, and that, I guess you could describe this webinar as gamification, that the kind of baseline or the foundation of the webinar is a presentation, but we have included games or puzzles throughout, and that's gamification. So you add elements of gameplay into your teaching method, but the method employed would be one of the more traditional methods, such as a presentation. And then you have game-based learning, which would be a series, which would be an escape room, and that's where the teaching method itself is a game, and it focuses on the game. So which term you use depends on how much of how much gaming is included in your teaching. Looking at the outcomes, when it collated all of the different gamified learning experiences in higher education, it identified that they have a positive impact on lots of different outcomes. They found that it was possible, it did improve engagement, it did improve motivation, and as a result of this, participants demonstrated higher levels of interest, participation, attendance in the teaching, and they did see some concrete increases in performance, both objectively measured but also self-perceived learning outcomes. So this review points to that gamified learning or game-based learning does have a positive impact on participants. If I come on to the systematic review, which Panagiotis has begun talking about, this was primarily focused on escape rooms. Again, it was across education, from higher education to university level education, and across multiple disciplines. Although it is important to highlight that out of 39 included studies, 21 of these were health professions. So it did make up a lot of the included studies in this review. They had 4 different outcomes of this review, but the last one is the one I'm going to speak about, and this was to what extent the intended goals of the educational escape rooms were achieved. And here we can see that it did. The use of an escape room does create an active learning environment. It's almost a given that it's the participants themselves that are having to complete the escape rooms and solve the puzzles. So they are active throughout, and also in the debriefing at the end. They're actively reflecting over their learning experience. So it's an active learning environment. This results in high levels of participant engagement, which the students perceive to be enjoyable. So they're satisfied with this as an educational tool. And many of the included studies focused on teamwork and communication. It's almost inherent in an escape room that you have to use teamwork. You need to use your colleagues that you complete in the escape room with, and you need to communicate with them. So the escape rooms did promote these skills, which could then provide content for the debriefing and have a positive effect on improving teamwork and communication flow. And as a result of these positive perceptions, the participants felt that it was a valuable addition to the curriculum and that they would appreciate the incorporation of escape rooms into their curriculum. Looking more specifically at the achieved learning goals, the majority of the included studies did conclude that they achieved their set out learning goals. They were obviously different for each of the included studies, but they did achieve them. I do put an asterisk there though, because there were some elements that were highlighted in the review, and that was that only 3 out of the 31 included studies actually assessed knowledge using a pre and a post test. So where they could actually measure the change and not just a one-off knowledge test at the end with no baseline to compare it to. So there's only 3 studies that incorporated this approach, and out of those 3, only 1 of them actually demonstrated an improvement in knowledge. So there's definitely something to be explored further there in the literature, looking at more robust approaches to measuring knowledge change. And then, as Panagiotis mentioned, that the students were more critical regarding their learning when it addressed new knowledge. So if it was a topic that they had never met before, this was the first time coming into that topic and trying to learn the topic, they were a little bit more critical towards escape rooms. It was felt that it was, if the goal was to reinforce or revise knowledge that they already had some idea about, then it was more positively perceived and resulted in a higher level of learning. So it also highlights potential uses for escape rooms and how they can be best implemented into the curriculum. So this concludes everything that we wanted to kind of say at the first webinar. As we mentioned, it is part of a 2-part webinar series, which I think we'll be holding the second one in autumn, and that's where we'll be focusing more on designing your own escape room, some of the considerations to be made when you're designing and implementing an escape room, and also how to design the different types of puzzles. So we have a couple of minutes for questions. I could see that there's come a couple of questions in the chat, which we can address first, and then if anybody has any other questions, if you just shout out, then we can answer those.
Okay, so just to recap existing questions, and we'll take them in turn. There was an initial one in the chat. In Zoom terminology, an escape room can be translated to breakout room. My quick response here would be that you can maybe create an escape experience using breakout rooms, but the breakout room is somewhere where many people go to separate in several groups. In Zoom, an escape room needs to have puzzles and ways to lock out areas, and it's usually either a physical space or a digital experience that provides barriers to entry based on puzzles. I don't know, Lucy, if you want to elaborate anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think breakout rooms in the Zoom context is more that it's just a way of dividing people into doing small group work. Obviously, you can incorporate puzzles into that group work, but in Zoom terminology, the way breakout rooms are used, I wouldn't say that equates to an escape room.
Okay. Okay, the next question is about integration to the curriculum. Is the escape room part of your curriculum? And the questionnaire asked that they have an interprofessional one, but find medical students particularly hesitant to commit to 2 hours. Now, my take on this is that the escape room that we have, it's currently in development. We piloted it with both students and practitioners, rescuers and doctors, because it's relevant also to rescuers and nurses. We so far have only volunteers, so we haven't integrated it into the curriculum, but indeed we are aiming for an approximately 2-hour experience, including the debriefing. Lucy, you might have more experience on that. Okay, are you with us, Lucy? Can you please tell me if I am on or oh?
Being recorded.
Sorry.
Let's see. Are you with us, Lucy?
Yeah, I cut out a couple of times. I'm sorry if I disappear. I'm not sure what's happening.
No problem. Did you hear the question? Want to?
Yeah, I can
take to
just
that?
quickly give our take. So the first escape room that we did a couple of years ago that has not been implemented into the curriculum. We don't actually have a curriculum at Cambs. We collaborate with the university, so we provide the courses that they ask us to, but we don't have students that are kind of just based with us. The escape room that we're designing for the Escape for Health project, that's focusing more on leadership, and so we're working within our own region to actually implement that into some of the leadership courses that we have for new leaders. So we are looking at actually implementing the newest escape room and collaborating with our leadership and organisation department to get that as to part of their training programs. Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of, I was just going to have a comment in terms of the 2-hour commitment of the students. I think it depends on how the escape rooms are run and how much weight is applied to the debriefing. I think you can get some really important and valuable learning aspects from the debriefing. So once the kind of students learn that they really do get something out of their participation, then I don't think 2 hours is unreasonable, because if you had a simulation session where you had 6 students simulating their own each a scenario, then that would also take a couple of hours. So I think it's all about getting the students to realize that it is a valuable learning experience, and then they hopefully would be more willing to commit.
Excellent. We have a question from Arlene Nishimvi, if I'm pronouncing correctly, who is offering to interested in running an educational escape room in their medical school. We're always happy, at least from my end, for collaboration, especially in the context of the Escape for Health project. We can get in contact and set any collaboration in place.
Shall we write our email addresses in the chat, and then if anybody wants to contact us with any further questions or collaboration ideas, then feel free to email us.
Yes.
So I think we could take 1 or 2 more questions, and then we can go. I can see that we are running out of time.
Okay. Now going through the questions from Hafiz Hamza, I see 2 questions. What are the best platforms that provide gamification in medical education? That is a rather topic specific, not topic, modality specific question. It depends on what you want to do. For technology enhanced learning approach, there are several platforms for creating desktop experiences, mobile experiences. For VR and AR, you have to do something with a professional game engine. Now, regarding escape rooms, it's a process that we'll hopefully cover in the next webinar. I don't know, Lucy, if you have any inputs on that.
Yeah, we're focusing more on the kind of design aspects and practical aspects of implementation in the next webinar. So hopefully we'll be able to address some of these questions at the second webinar.
I see that we have quite a lot of questions. Make a choice. I took the lead so far, so let's make a choice if you want to close the webinar with one.
We can take, should we take a last question? And then if you have any further questions, yeah, feel free to email and get in contact. Or if you come to the second webinar as well, it would also be an opportunity to ask further questions. So if we take a last question, and then we'll finish it there.
Okay, go ahead.
Where were we up to?
The last one is, how do you see escape room versus escape box?
In terms of how do we see it, whether one is more effective than the other, or what do you mean by that question?
I must confess that I first encountered the term escape box here right now. So I'm a bit tabula rasa here.
Yeah, there has been an escape box used and described in the literature, which is more, instead of a room, you focus on a box that has different puzzles to solve to open the box. I think they're both really interesting topics. I don't think there's been a direct comparison between an escape room and an escape box, so I can't comment on whether on the learning experiences are different or whether one is more effective than the other. I think yeah, there would need to be more literature and more explanation of these two formats before we could conclude when we should use an escape room and when we should use an escape box.
It's an interesting premise, the box, because it's very portable and also provides a very interesting way to anchor knowledge. I mean, there could be some very useful use cases for that, but I think the jury is still out on that.
Yeah. So I think we'll finish the webinar. I can see that there's still coming comments into the chat box. As mentioned, if you do want to have any more information about our experiences or just ask any questions, then feel free to contact us both on our emails. And hopefully we will see you at the next webinar in the autumn. But thank you very much for participating. We hope that it's been useful for you.
Thank you.